when COVID hit, I was living in New York City at the time, which was obviously not the best place to be when that whole thing went down. But yeah, I moved back home for a couple months, and then my best friend Lorenzo, who was living in Syracuse at the time, I was doing so many sessions with him that I just ended up moving there. And within a couple months of moving there, we set up the candy shop in the middle of the pandemic. So call it a questionable choice, but
Yeah.
it ended up working out. Thank God. But so yeah, we did that for about 2 years, and then I decided to kind of get out of that world, the world of producing, and just move down here, man.
Yeah. So why don't we start from the beginning then? Just talk about a little bit of your origins and kind of how you got started into music, how you got involved with it.
Sure.
I feel like everyone has their own, especially in the music space, everyone has their own kind of track that they go on, and there's definitely a lot of similarities. Like, you got a lot of guys that start playing classical from when they're young and then slowly
Hmm.
get involved with production because of either a band they really like or a song that, gets them kind of going
Right.
in that direction. But yeah, if you could just like talk a little bit about kind of what got you into the whole world of more making your own music rather than just playing other people's
Yeah,
songs.
man. Well, I had been playing for a really long time since I was 9, and I didn't really start making my own stuff until high school ish. Beginning of high school, I think. I mean, it feels like a blur right now, so it's hard to recall exact ages and what years when all this stuff was. But I think I was 15 in bands with my buddies, and that's kind of when I started writing original music along with them. And from that point on, it just kind of exploded. I mean, whether it was my own stuff or with the bands I was in at the time, that's all I was doing, just kind of writing music all the time. And I didn't really come from a musical family. My parents, I mean, my whole family, but my parents especially, loved music and had a really great collection of it, but definitely didn't come from a family of players. So it took me, you know, it was kind of uncharted territory
Yeah.
for me, just trailblazing a little bit there. But yeah, it took a really long time to be comfortable with putting out my own stuff that wasn't just under a band or something, a all-encompassing name
Yeah.
instead of just my name. That was, you know, something I had to get over.
Everyone's kind of, got their own thing going. So it's really cool to
Totally.
see how, I don't know. I definitely hear it in a lot of your stuff because I really like, I've liked your music ever since like 3 a.m. Black t-shirt. Like, I remember hearing that being like, damn, like this kid's got, he's got something special going because you already had like a really good, I could tell you had a really good feeling for the music. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, since then I've kind of been kind of just listening to your stuff and seeing how it progresses, and it's really cool. I mean, I think about that in
Thank you,
my own
man.
stuff too, just like
Right.
things change and you mature as an artist. You have the influences that kind of get you there. Um, and yeah, it's kind of just, it's a ride, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're not really, sometimes if you're not cringing at your older stuff, you're not really growing in a
Absolutely.
certain, and it's weird, especially, in the age we live in where everything you do is public and all the changes you have to go through are in public, and being young and trying to figure your sound out in public is really stressful, and it's something that has really, kept me up at night a lot of times. And it's only recently within the past year or so that I've really just said I'm not gonna chase this thing anymore. I'm just gonna play the shit that makes me happy, man. And I've had people, barking in my ear, you should do this, you should do that, this will get you here. And I'm like, I got to the point where I was doing that stuff and I was hating it. I'm like, I don't even want to do this anymore. And so I kind of had to step back and remember what it was all about. And it's very simple for me now. It's just, do I like the song? There's no bullshit anymore in it. And, it is what it is. It's kind of just
Yeah,
that
it's
mentality,
very true.
man.
How do
Yeah.
you, as an artist, how do you manage like the pressure for, for you to play a certain style of music or to make certain kind of songs? I feel like there's a lot of pressure coming from, the uh, kind of over consumerism kind of nature of music that we have now. I watched a movie not too long ago about this young 15-year-old kid who um, basically just hung out with the band when they were on tour. I think it was called Almost Famous. It was kind
Oh
of just
yeah.
interesting. You
I
you
love
probably
that
know the
movie.
film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great movie.
Yeah. So I watched it and I kind of was it made me kind of reflect on the whole, just consumer side of music and how it pressures people into doing things. It pressures bands to stay together when, they're not really into it anymore. So how do
Right.
you deal like as an artist, how do you navigate that? Like do you feel like as you've gotten older you've just kind of pushed back more and said, like I'm just gonna do what I do and not worry so much about it or you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely came with age and experience. And part of why I'm grateful for the 2 years I spent professionally producing is, and I don't want this to sound like I was learning from other people's demise, and because that's not, I would never wish that on anyone. But I watched a lot of people succumb to that pressure and just completely crumble under it. And our or projects that we put 50 plus hours in never get released, and I don't even like it anymore, blah blah blah, and all this stuff. And so when I was younger, I definitely was caught in that trap immensely. And I didn't, when you're young, your teeth aren't sharp and you don't know how to stand up for yourself, especially when there's so many people telling you should be doing one thing versus another. And recently, it's just like I just surround myself with my friends and everything's cool. And it's so much less about this rise and grind mentality. I've always kind of been you know, repelled from that. But just that whole like you got to be doing this every second of every day. You got to be doing it this way, and it's just it's a waste to me. I don't subscribe to that anymore. But like I said, that came with age and experience, and eventually being like I either stop doing this or I start doing it a different way. And you know, luckily I was surrounded by people in my life that gave me space for that. And had they not been there, that I wouldn't be here. Man, I don't know, that's a tough question. I think you know you got to ask yourself, does financial success equal more eyes on you? Because
Yeah.
that's not always the case. There's people who've got all this money coming in from Spotify, but no one really knows who they are, and there's really not an expectation set there for them. There's no bar
True.
to be
They don't have
to,
to
to
tour. It's
right.
just all online. Yeah.
Yeah, people just don't care about it anymore, and I think that um, I would say more so than pressure, money sometimes equates to can make you lazy, and it
Yeah.
can dull your teeth a little bit. And
Definitely.
I've always worked, it's just human nature, but I've always worked the hardest and wanted it the most when I was struggling for it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
There's almost like this animalistic aspect of the creativity that kind of fuels it, you know, like a
right.
hunger. And if you don't
Hmm.
have that hunger, then you're not going to be able to create the same kind of raw kind of emotion in your sound or in your, it doesn't even need to be music, it can be art.
Yeah.
If you don't want it, I think
Yeah.
you often hear people say like, "Oh, this artist doesn't make good stuff anymore. Like their old stuff was the best." And it's kind of a cliche, but it's also kind of like true. Like I
Yeah.
think the reason why that is just like you said is, you know, when they were starting up, they wanted it.
Right.
They needed
Right.
it.
And
They were, struggling. They were struggling to pay the bills, struggling to pay rent.
mhm. And it's like you have to want it really bad, and you have to be secure enough in your sense of self that you're honest with yourself about all your transactions in that world, because I've one of the philosophies I'm just trying to stick to now is like stop lying about stuff. And lying can come in the form of the lyrics you write or the music you release or how you interact with people. And if you just stop lying, people tend to gravitate towards you more, I have found. And lying can be really sneaky in our world, and it kind of goes hand in hand with succumbing to the pressure.
Yeah.
If you let that pressure get the best of you, you're going to start lying in your music and for the sake of getting it in front of more people or whatever it may be. But I just don't have the energy for that anymore, man. It's such an act and it's exhausting. And, I'm not old, but I'm older than I was.
Yeah.
And I don't have the wherewithal anymore to just keep barking up these trees that aren't dropping any fruit for me. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I feel like there's a lot of genres, especially the newer genres, that promote this just facade. There's really not this emphasis on being honest with who you are or even who you're around. And I feel like it kind of encourages that kind of mentality of, you know, fake lifestyle, fake music, fake
Mm-hmm.
friends. Like everything just becomes fake. And I don't know, it's sad to see. I feel like
Yeah,
it's the last thing that you
I
want from the creative world.
right, right, and I think it has more to do with the structure of our social society than it does with the genres, because I've
Yeah,
met a
that's
lot of
true.
people in a lot of different genres that are incredibly honest and incredibly, driven and just incredible people. But, I meet a lot of people where I go, if you were a musician, I feel like you'd be in this world. And it's not always fair to judge people like that because you never know. But that's kind of just the society we live in, and it's not necessarily just our generation. It's across the board because everything's so accessible to people of all ages now. It's just this, like you said, there's not an emphasis on true art and honesty in terms of the mainstream, because I know a lot of people will hear that and go, well, I know this person, blah, blah, and like, of course,
Yeah.
there's
There's
pockets of
always the
stuff, and
exception.
it's the good fight. I mean, it's literally the good fight. These people who are fighting it, and that's what gives you hope. And that can come in the form of EDM or hip hop or rock and roll or folk music, and it can be anything. But I do. I do agree with you that it's
Do you think that
tough.
that
It's tough
trend
sometimes.
is related to social media?
100%. I think TikTok has a big thing to do with it. I think just this is such a dead horse that we keep beating, but just the instant gratification of everything.
Yeah.
I think that has a lot to do with it. Attention span and being willing to listen more so, because you can listen for 30 seconds, but you know that doesn't necessarily equate to like an attention span.
Yeah.
I have nothing against people who are very active on it, because some people use it for good and it makes them happy or whatever. But like I said, with lying, it's very easy to slip into just that world of trickery there, and you know you're not checking yourself enough in that
Yeah.
world.
Yeah, you see it even like you turn on like Netflix and like it used to be that there would be a new movie, but now it's just TV. Like that I
Right?
feel like people don't even have the attention span to watch a whole movie. Like
No.
even when they take the time to have an attention span, it's still like, well, maybe I can get through this TV episode and like I don't know, it's kind of crazy to think about. Like
Right.
it's changing our brains.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Our brains are incredibly rewired, and it's all perspective too, because someone might sit through two episodes of a show where the episodes are 50 minutes, but they can't sit through a movie. And when you total it all together, the movie is shorter than the time they spent.
Yeah.
But it's just the thought that it's a TV show and it's less of a
Yeah.
commitment.
And it is that
And
instant gratification like you said. Because
right,
each episode is kind of fueling like the whole kind of arc, right? It's giving them,
right,
the build up. It's giving them the, climax of the show. It's giving them every
Mhm.
part. It's not,
Yeah.
they don't have to wait as long. You know.
Right. And it sucks and it's tough and because as a creative you it's like adapt or die, you know. Your audience you're single-handedly not going to make the attention span of the world longer with this or that. It's how can you take that and reframe your perspective on the whole thing? And I haven't figured that out yet. I still feel like a crusty old man a lot of times and
I don't
a
know.
lot of these
I see you on TikTok trying to do good, trying to give people like good advice. Songwriting advice.
right,
I think that's
right,
like I think that's a start. I mean, you have to use the tools that are available to try to do good. I mean, there's a lot of
right,
people using them to do just quick money grabs and all sorts of other
right,
things, but I think there's definitely still room, even with all the negative aspects of kind of like TikTok and the quick real style like social
mm-hmm.
system that we have in place right now online. People still use it for good, and it's just you know it's unfortunate that that stuff is never going to be as viral because people don't talk about positive stuff. They talk about
Right,
the negativity. They talk about the latest thing that Kanye said. They don't
right.
talk about someone doing something positive. It's sad, but
Mm-hmm.
I
And
think there's
what's
room.
it 100%. And it, kind of piggybacking off that, what's interesting about the others, if you take the instant gratification thing and then you look at the other side of that coin, I think people are also, myself included, incredibly desperate for things that are real. And how can you show them something real in 30 seconds? You
True.
know, it's tough because a lot of times we want to take our time and you have to pick and choose your battles here in a certain way. Maybe it is 30 seconds, but that's 30 seconds of information that person might be able to go use for good that they otherwise wouldn't have had you not made that piece
Definitely.
of content. So it's weird. It's so nuanced, man. It's so nuanced.
100%. Yeah, it really is just a wild world.
Yeah.
I feel like,
Yeah.
do you set goals for yourself to use, like, I'm a big goals person, right? So I thrive off of them. Do you set goals to, like, use TikTok or like upload things or like do certain things with the technology, or do you set goals more based on kind of projects and bigger style goals rather than like little things?
Yeah. I'm definitely a more big picture goal person. And in the last couple of years, my goals with my music and my goals with my personal life have bled together quite a bit. And, if I sit down and make a list of goals, it's going to go, get a song on a Spotify editorial, uh, go to the gym today, get a job, write a new song. It's all kind of mixed in, and,
Yeah,
and I've I found that achieving goals that better myself personally, when I take care of myself, obviously the career thrives. So
definitely.
yeah, and I don't set goals like I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to think of it because I do it very subconsciously, and oftentimes they daily goals are can also be just seen as routine, and that's very important to me, um, especially with my health. You know. So yeah,
Do you have a do you have like a list at all of like, I'm gonna do, like, for me, I can like look up on my computer. I have like a list of like long term goals. Do you set like lists of like, do you write anything down ever? Are you a note taker? Do you find like that kind of thing useful? Or are you more of just kind of a more natural, like, you set something in the back of your brain and you're kind of organized enough during daily life that that kind of manifests itself into existence?
I think definitely the latter. I've tried to simplify my life enough to the point where there's not enough things going on to make me a scatterbrain about certain things that I have to do and achieve. And I just kind of view it as a couple of buckets that I need to, like, dump a little bit of water in from time to time. And eventually they'll get there. But, I'm horrible about writing things down. I know I should. And um, but I only have like
Oh,
a couple goals that aren't routine right now.
yeah.
It's like get a song on a Spotify tutorial, like I said before. Uh, Play my first solo show in Atlanta. Finish my album. Oh,
Oh, did I drop? I think I dropped. Are we back?
you hear me?
We're back.
Okay, we're back.
So you're
Um,
saying you want to play a show in Atlanta?
yes, yeah, I want to book my first solo show, and it's terrifying because I no longer have my band that I've been playing with for years, and I no longer have an audience, and so it really is a fresh start, and that's kind of what I needed at this point. I need to shock myself with new things like that, you know, with the goal of just growing in mind. So, yeah, those are just like a couple career goals.
Yeah,
I want to, in terms of and also big goals, like I want to be in great shape. I want to be financially stable. That's a goal of mine, and I'm sure it is with a lot of my friends and colleagues in this
definitely.
world. But um, yeah, yeah, I'm much more mental on the whole thing.
So when you moved to Atlanta, did you kind of just what prompted that change? Because that's a huge move. I mean, you're upstate New York boy, kind of for a long time. So what kind of prompted the move? Like, did you just decide I've had enough of this like cold weather and like I need a new environment, I need to shock the system? Or did you, you know, did was it kind of brewing for a while?
I wasn't running from anything per se, and I think at the end of the day, I really just needed a shock, and I just wanted to experience more. And I had lived in a couple cities in New York State, and I wanted to try living elsewhere. You know, um, Kind of tying in with this whole journey of just self bettering and
Yeah.
just being happier. And the toughest part is, the year before I left, I made the best of friends in New York that I had to leave, and just there were so many amazing people and so many amazing things I was doing, and someone might view that as a stupid move, moving away from all that stuff, but I was
No,
kind of
it's never
looking,
dumb.
yeah, I was looking at it as a sign, like here's another opportunity in my life to do something that's really hard and to do something scary and to do something that's going to help me grow as a person. And that feeling, what kind of outweighed the smaller things like missing people who I can still visit and moving away from my family and moving away from the venues that I love and the audience that I had. And I still have all those people in my life. I just can't drive 20 minutes and go see them anymore.
Yeah.
But it just needed something scary, man. And it so happened that a couple of other buddies that I had that were looking for the same thing, and so we all moved down here together. I didn't move down here alone, um, which
That's
is
nice.
huge. Yeah, yeah, I definitely
So you still have
we
like
had
a little bit of a support system with you.
right a hundred
Yeah.
percent, and they're all going through the same thing. So it's nice to come home to for relatable things, as opposed to moving somewhere alone and you're coming home at night to the same fear that you left with in the morning and that you experienced while you were out. And so I get a little bit of a reset every day. I can kind of forget about my situation at night and wake up with a really fresh perspective. And the way I see it, the more I do that, the closer I'll get to a place like this feeling like home, which is really what I
Definitely.
was after.
Why Atlanta?
Dude, we were all we were all looking for something, and I didn't really want to live in New York City again. I did that, and it wasn't really for me. Um, I wasn't too keen on living in Nashville, and what I should have said before this was I was looking for another big city.
Yeah,
Um, and so LA, Nashville, New York, three big music cities, and at least historically, there's a bunch more now: Austin, Asheville, Atlanta. But I was looking for another big city, but I wanted something that wasn't quite at that point of saturation yet. And I wanted to make sure it was a city I was moving to for me, not for music, because I wanted to be happy enough to pursue music in this city and not let music take the front seat in terms of my mental health. Um, so we were all looking for a place like that, and my girlfriend um, was like, I'm thinking about Atlanta. Would you maybe want to check that out? And I looked into it. It has a really up and coming music scene, and has had
definitely.
a music scene for a while. And we just came and visited, and it was sort of the fact that I didn't know much about it that excited me. It was the biggest shock and the biggest scare I could do. Um, and I was just like, you know what? I'm feeling like a traveler right now, so let's just go do it while we're young and check it out. And it's proven to be fruitful. We've made amazing friends down here, and I'm fortunate enough to have a great job with really great people, and I'm
That's awesome.
yeah, I'm excited enough to make music every day. That was my goal, and I feel like I've achieved it.
Yeah. Do you so you moved there and you're with friends and you're with your girlfriend, and have you felt like there's been like a reasonable space for you to be able to find musicians to play with? I know that you left your band, right, in New York. So have you been able to do you think in the future you're going to kind of not move forward from that, but be playing more with other people, or are you going to venture more into the area of solo performance? I'm sure that you're going to look to play at venues. And so, what does that look like for you in the future? Are you going to be basically focused on, you know, Aaron Rizzo, or are you going to be focused on Aaron Rizzo accompanying someone, or are you going to be focused on Aaron Rizzo with a new group? And what does it look like when it comes to, like, how are you going to find, or can you find people that you feel comfortable enough to kind of make that leap with and play like live? Because I feel like it's much easier to play in a recording setting with people that you don't know, because there doesn't need to be as much kind of, in sync with everyone. You can each record your part individually. You can focus on kind of your own thing. You know, you don't need to have that uh, kind of long-term trust built. But when you're
Right.
performing, you need that trust. So what does that
Yeah.
look like in the future? Are you going to look for new people to play with, or are you going to do it solo?
I'm currently in the hunt for my own band down here. And I don't like to look at it as my other guys I left behind. I'm just not currently playing with them. They will
100%.
always be in my life, and I will always want to play with them. And they are, like
They're the
everybody else
homies.
has yeah, they're the homies, and like everybody
Yeah.
else has a roster, they're in my roster. And as someone who plays under my own name, that affords me the ability to rotate musicians and maintain the same image of the band. Because unless I die, like this can go on
Yeah.
until I die.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for new people, and I want to just play with people, and I'm allowing myself the space and the time to be sure about it and to take my time in that search and to make sure these are the right people because it's it's easier to ask someone to be in your band than to kick them out of your band. So you got to be sure.
That's true.
And yeah, you got to be super sure about who you're playing with. And so right now I'm just kind of window shopping. You know, I find myself at musical events. We were doing an open mic, and I'm meeting people through work and this and that. And so I'm just kind of vibing people out right now, and also understanding that I don't have clout in this city yet. You know, I can't walk around like I've with a chip on my shoulder. It's I have to be respectful to this city and to the scene that has been here long before I was. And at this point, I'm just listening, observing, taking in what I can, seeing what relationships exist, who knows who, and who I vibe with and who I don't vibe with, and kind of just taking it from there.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like in music, there's this kind of juxtaposition of every musician is a little bit of a loner at heart,
Yeah.
but then we're also like not. We're introverts and we're extroverts at the same time. We like playing with people. We like, being, either in a band or, doing some kind of performance with others. But at the same time, when it comes down to maybe songwriting or producing something or, doing something else, it's like we lock ourselves in a room, with all the lights off, focused on just that one thing. So do you feel like you experience that too? I mean, I definitely feel that way myself. I know that a lot of musicians feel that way. So is that something that you feel?
100%. I recently finished this book by John Koenig called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. And on the back of the book, there's this word called sonder. And it's basically just the realization that everyone you walk by and everyone you interact with is the main character in their own timeline. And how jarring that can be to think about.
Break through the
And
matrix.
exactly. So I that made me think about music a lot and how lucky I was to have guys that were willing to set aside maybe their own opinions that I was never even aware of in order to make my stuff sound good. And it also made me, think about what you were just saying. Like everybody is the lead character in their own film, and you have to respect that and understand that if you're ever going to be able to work with people. And that kind of manifests itself in respecting opinions and listening to people and you know providing people with validity in what they say, and making sure they know that what they're saying is valid. And so I definitely feel that. I definitely it the older you get, it feels like the more you feel that because of how much
100%.
busier you get, and how hard it is to come together with people for either watching the Bills lock it down or band practice or whatever, even a show. It's so
Bill's
hard to find
Mafia.
the Bills
Yeah.
Mafia. Let's give a quick shout out to our Mafia. It's so hard to get together to do stuff. And even people who live right down the street,
I know.
it's like,
Yeah,
it's crazy. So it makes me appreciate. The more I realize that everyone has their own thing, it's the more I appreciate when we can all come together for one thing.
definitely. I love that. I feel like in general, people need to, I mean, it goes back to what we were talking about social media, but people need to kind of realize that people are the most important, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's the people in your life and the relationships that you make and, the real conversations that you have, not this like online fake, like, I mean, it's also this, fast paced lifestyle that has been kind of pushed on us just by society that
Right.
is, I don't know, it's kind of it goes against like everything that I at least think is good for the human brain and like emotions and building relationships. I don't know. It's weird.
It's just you can't sacrifice your relationships for the sake of small gains. And I say small in the sense of like spiritually small gains and things that may not really matter.
Yeah.
and because I've done it. I mean, every musician, every artist has done it. They've put their relationships aside to achieve something that they look back on in a year and they say, "Damn, I really wish I hadn't done what I did." And, how many times do you have to go through that to realize that the people in your life are the most important thing you have? And maintaining good relationships with people is paramount. And if you have that locked down, everything else will fall into place.
Yeah.
But if no one likes you, if no one likes to be around you, you're not getting the gig. You're not getting a band. Like
Yeah.
it's not gonna happen. So, and I think that kind of ties into the Instagram hype beast, rise and grind people. It's like, shut up. Show me that you're a person. Show me that you like care about people and that you are empathetic and that you have a heart and that you know what truly matters. And those are the kinds of people that I want to do whatever I can to help them move forward. You know, Even not being in a spotlight, just being like, I like you. Here's a resource that I have that I think would benefit you greatly. I want you to go as far as you can with this, and I hope it works out for you. And kind of sticking your neck out for certain people. Like those things start to happen when you just really, you know, put your eggs in the relationship basket.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, unfortunately, the music industry, in addition to like, I'd say most creative industries, because a lot of the creative industries at this point are so tied into money, is that
Mm-hmm.
you have, unfortunately, you have two camps, right? You have the camp of there's going to be people that you meet they're going to ride and die for you, you know what I mean? They're going to you're just going to click, you know? And that person's going to get you, and they could be a manager, they could be someone working at a company that they're going to help you out. But then they're also on the other side of the spectrum, there's people who they're just in it for the money. They don't care about you. They'll use you, abuse you, throw you away, and it's a weird thing to navigate. Um,
Right.
I feel like when we talked before, you were telling me a little about like some of the sync licensing luck that you've had, and a lot of that I would say is definitely connected to some good relationships that you were lucky
Mm-hmm.
enough to build. Um, but there's a lot of people that probably wouldn't be able to like immediately get those kind of relationships. So what kind of advice would you give to people who maybe don't know how to find, or maybe aren't as skilled at finding kind of people that are going to treat them well and, be in their camp?
Yeah. I would say I got a great, actually, I'm just going to pass on a piece of advice that I got from one of the collaborators that I worked with at the candy shops. His name is Justin Spalding. He told me once, we were having the conversation of I need to raise my rate because I can't afford to survive at the rate I'm working at right now. But I'm afraid I'm going to lose clients. And he looked at me and he's like, that you just need to let the floor fall out. You need to stand up for yourself and you need to stomach and understand that people are going to leave you when you stick up for yourself. And really understanding that it's not your fault. It's no, that's not your burden to bear, sticking up for yourself and other people feeling bad about it. So, the biggest piece of advice I would give is just let the floor fall out. Stick up for yourself and don't be afraid to, and just be honest. Kind of tying back into earlier when we were talking about lying and things, it's just don't do that. And if you're honest, when the floor falls out, all of the right people will be left behind, and everyone who needed to go away will go away. And so, because I was that person, the person who didn't have any of these relationships yet, and I was scared and I was introverted and I didn't know how to do it. And as soon as I just started being myself and being honest about the kind of music that I like to play, whether like stuff like guilty pleasures and brain scratching things that you like to do, like the more you admit that stuff, the more friends you make because everyone feels that way. Everyone's scared, everyone's nervous, everyone's worried that people are going to leave them if they're honest. So, as long as you know that everybody has that same fear, it makes it a lot easier to do it, to go through with it. So I hope that answers your question. I kind of just
Yeah,
went off
definitely.
there.
I think that a lot of people are they're hesitant to, I don't want to say admit that, but to kind of show that kind of vulnerable side of them to
Hmm.
like the public or, even to their friends. I think that it's a very, unfortunately intimidating thing for people to kind of let people see that they're vulnerable just like the rest of us. I mean, you see, like, I don't really use Instagram at all anymore. I haven't really used it in years at this point, but um, like Instagram is the perfect example. If you go on Instagram and everyone's doing great, everyone's,
Hmm.
smiling, everyone's partying, everyone's rich, right? No
Yeah.
one, and it's because of that, and because, you see people succeeding, you don't want to be like the only one who's not succeeding. You don't want to be the one
Right.
that's, you know, struggling. You don't want to be the one that's gone through some kind of failure. So how do you honestly expect people who don't have that musical like experience and that natural ability to share, right? They're gonna have no chance. They're gonna be
Yeah.
sucked right in.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're very vulnerable when you start. People are going to come after you, and the system is going to come after you hard. And, sometimes you have to get chewed up and spit out a couple times in order to start moving forward. And, yeah, I don't envy people who are earlier on than I am. And I don't envy those who are further on than I am, and I don't envy myself. Everything is what it is. Every stage comes with different
That's some
problems.
big brain right there.
Yeah, yeah, right. Uh, the people who you think are doing great are
Yeah.
not doing great, and like you said, social media allows us to, cherry pick the good parts of our lives and show it to people and make yourself more attractive in that way. But you know that like ask yourself if the server went down tomorrow, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, everything gone, who would you be? Would you really be able to give someone a 30-second elevator pitch of who you are as a person without pulling up your phone to show them your feed? And so you just can't. That's another piece of advice. You just can't put that much stock in that stuff. Anything that's that fleeting, like so vain and so fleeting, and it's like it's not worth it. It's not worth it to destroy yourself in your formative years of your teens through your 20s, and like for the sake of what? You know, getting more likes. Who cares? Make
Yeah.
people like you in real life.
Yeah.
So,
It's meaningless.
all right,
I mean, speaking of getting deep, let's talk about failure,
let's get
right?
there.
Failure is like a hard thing to admit, and it's a hard thing to look back at sometimes because it reminds us of not the regrets that people like to talk about, but the regrets that people don't like to talk about.
Hmm.
So if you think back to kind of your whole musical journey, there have been undoubtedly like failures. What do you think is something that you just, when you look back, you're like, damn, like that's really where I made a crucial mistake. And if I just didn't do that one thing, things would have been different. Or do you not think like that? Do you think that the failures are essential to where you are now?
I'm definitely more in the camp of the latter. That every tiny thing I did led me to where I am now. But you always wonder, where would I be now had I not done that thing? Would I be happier? Because you sit here and you're like, I could be happier. I could be doing better. Um, I think it's not necessarily a certain instance that I think back to, but more so of like when I look back at all the times I just, you know, lied for the sake of vanity. And, I really regret that. And I understand that that was part of growing up and that was part of learning and becoming the person I am today. And I I still have a long way to go with all that stuff, but I regret letting my small indulgences get in the way of my relationships with people. And you as musicians, you just watch stuff slip away, and oftentimes you find yourself just not really caring because of where you're at that moment of, I only care about this one thing in my career. And you're just like, man, I wish I cared about some stuff more. Stuff that wasn't necessarily directly in line with my musical career, but just life stuff. Um, but I try not to think in that camp too much because you can't go back and change it. It's done. It's in the past. And
Definitely.
I was thinking about this earlier, like in a world where everything from the past is so easily accessible, it's really hard to leave it in the past. I think a
Definitely.
lot of times, I mean, your feed on social media is a perfect example. You can go
Yeah.
back and look at all the things you posted that you thought were funny or cool or valuable, and you
Now you're
cringe
like
at it.
cringe. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
but whatever. It's over. It's done. If people are gonna judge you based on who you were a year ago or 2 years ago or 10 years ago, then those people are should not be in your life. Those are the people that should disappear when the floor falls out, in my opinion.
Yeah. Do you think that, how much do you think people have the ability to change? Like you say that you should basically look at something that someone did 10 years ago and say, well, that's in the past. But aren't there things that people do that really kind of shape who they are?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely true. Um,
Like,
Oftentimes
undoubtedly,
I
there are things that are too far, right? There are things that we look at, for example, like some criminal or someone who does something absolutely
right,
heinous, and we draw a
right,
line there, right? But
hmm
then I think we also draw a line on the other end where we look at something and say, well, that person was a kid. That's part of maturing.
right,
And
hmm
so I think with this ultra transparent past that we have now with social media and just like the online world, I feel like we're starting to reach more and more gray area when it comes to like where do you draw the line between the two extremes,
right,
because everyone's different, right? One thing that someone says 5 years ago that now it's just cringe, or now it's just like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, that's kind of like an off-color joke or whatever. I,
right,
I wouldn't say that now. But how do you kind of draw the line between that, which is clearly just a nothing, if you could call it that, between that and something that, like, well, the person is still like that now, and that's
right,
what shaped who they are.
right. Well, it's tough. I mean, it's subjective and it varies on a case by case basis. Like every single thing you did in your past is different. Someone who may have done something horrible could also have done some stuff that is not so horrible that they still cringe at, but is
Yeah,
overshadowed by the horrible thing that they did. And I think, I really think people can change, but they have to. There's so much of a mental journey that you have to go through and accept and become one with before you can have the wherewithal to want to change. So it's like you got to have all these boxes checked before you can change.
I agree.
So I don't know. Like you said, it's really gray. It's a really
Yeah,
fine line, and um, the part of the reason why we tread so carefully. And how much of the ability to look back and see these things is holding that in and of itself. That ability is holding people back from changing
yeah,
because their mistakes are so visible.
very
Or
true.
something. It's tough.
Because when you address it, right, you make it real,
Hmm
and you make it much more in the forefront, where if you
Right.
don't address it, maybe it could just kind of fade. you know I
Right.
think we're also getting really good at taking, these situations where someone says something or does something that maybe they're not proud of, or, maybe that for whatever reason didn't age well, and we're really good at taking it out of context, and we're really
Mhm.
good at kind of shaping the end all be all with whatever narrative we want to paint that person with. Like, we have a brushstroke of guilty. We're going to paint that person with that brushstroke. If we don't like
Right.
that person, I mean, online, you just look at Twitter, right? People love to take something that someone says out of context and make them the villain. So I think
Yeah.
that it's going to be an interesting road forward, trying to encourage people to, you know, actively give people, not to say a second chance, but, you know, an honest evaluation of what they said.
Yeah. It's so tough because all it takes is one idiot either digging something up or making something up
Yeah.
for you to have to go on defense.
And people lie.
Yeah, exactly. People lie, and as soon as you have to go on defense for some of this stuff, there's going to be a lot of people who will never take a second look at it. They're
Yeah.
going to say, that's a bad person, moving on.
Yeah. I'm done. Yeah.
I often think that that's the majority of people because who's got time to really dig into this and find out
I
the
would
truth? You
agree.
know, like no one has. That's you have the time to see a quick tweet, but you don't have time to do a full investigation.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm not
so
audit the
it,
audit. Yeah. 100%.
yeah, it's so tough, man. Why you gotta just you do your best to be honest and be a good person, and the people who are gonna come after you for certain things are gonna do it. And this is also not to say that people shouldn't be publicly ostracized for doing horrible things. Like that happens, and those people, shouldn't be let off the hook.
Yeah.
And so there's another fine line of nuance and gray area where it's like it's case by case basis, man.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's hard to distinguish
Yeah. Do you ever kind of just take a break from social media, take a break from it all?
all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. I find myself like, unfortunately giving myself quick doses of it, but in terms of really being an active member of social media, I find those days to be few and far between as of late.
I feel like taking breaks are, it's an important part of not just like social media, but like your job, your music career, anything creative, because you can easily get burnt out.
Yeah.
If you're an athlete working out, taking breaks, I feel like even if you look at the natural human routine, we sleep, right? That's our body's way of taking a break. Um,
Yeah.
I feel like that's an essential part of
Hmm.
everything.
Yeah. I mean, I stepped away from producing because I couldn't stand it anymore. It was affecting my mental health so much. And I would take a really, really long break and I would go months without producing a song for someone else. And then I would work on someone else's song for 3 hours and be plunged back into a panic attack. And it was
Yeah,
like, oh my God, like this is clearly something, there's some things you have to take a break from, and there's some things you just have to step away from altogether. And knowing how to distinguish which one you should do and like when it's time is really hard. And it's why burnout happens. And it's like people just drive themselves into a pit because of expectations, unrealistic expectations they've set for themselves of I need to be this, I need to achieve this by this age or whatever. Like if your mental health isn't in check, everything's going to fall apart.
definitely.
And you're going to resort to lying to get ahead because it's easier and it doesn't take as much mental energy and so it's ultimately it's everyone's choice, what they want to do. But if I could give advice to anyone struggling through it, it's like there's no shame in stepping away from something, taking a break, or just admitting to yourself that you don't like something that
Definitely.
you previously you told yourself I'm going to do this, I'm going to be this, and at one point you wanted it but you don't anymore. It's really important because you're just going to end up going the wrong way in the maze and you're never going to find the end. You're just going to be stuck in that loop forever. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult thing because it connects with goals, because you want to set those goals. But
Hmm.
if you set those goals to be, you know, unachievable per se, then you're going to fall into that area of just, you're unable to meet your goals. And then you're going to be kind of pushing more and more pressure on yourself to try to meet those goals. And then you're going to slowly deteriorate because you're unable to kind of reevaluate if you take things a little bit too seriously or if you just aren't good at setting realistic goals. I mean, it's
Right.
a it's a difficult thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's often this thing of, I'm a musician or I'm an artist, and I'm my goals, and I'm separate from society. I'm not a
Yeah,
part of it. I'm like, I'm observing and reporting it. It's like you are just as much a part of it as the dude that works at the bank.
yeah.
And like you owe yourself the same, mental, physical, and emotional care that that person does. And so if you think you're immune to it, it's going to come for you harder.
I feel like
I just,
that's like a little bit of the narcissist that's inside every musician,
oh
right?
yeah,
I feel like every
yeah,
musician has that, that part of them because you kind of have to think that you're a little bit better than other people to make music. Otherwise,
yeah.
why
To
would you
want
be
to leave
making
your
music?
bedroom, right? Yeah, yeah. It's tough. It's tough to get to the point where you're getting real time
Yeah,
feedback and evidence that it's working. Well, but until you get to that point, you kind of got to be like, well, whether I think so or not, I have to think this is the shit,
yeah.
or else it's never going to leave the computer or the bedroom or the hard drive.
So true.
So yeah,
Yeah,
there is a certain level of self confidence and you know, I cockiness in a way. People are attracted to a certain level of that in a musician. I mean, it's why we call them entertainers.
yeah.
You don't coming out of your shell. You got to be confident enough to do that. So it's tough for a lot of people. It's tough to stomach doing that and not being up on stage being like, I look like an idiot right now. You know, it's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean people are attracted to confidence even outside of music. I mean,
Oh yeah.
just like relationships in general. Like
Hmm.
and men, women, like people like confident people, but then you can easily become too confident. You can become cocky
Right.
and you see that in music too, you know.
Hmm. You have
It's
to be confident but aware.
yeah,
You know,
aware.
always. Oh yeah, very aware.
Yeah.
Self awareness is something I'm very much honing in on recently, and being like, man, if everyone was self aware, like this would be a crazy place.
I
You
don't,
know.
dude. I feel like of a lot of musicians that I know, you've got to be one of the like most humble, down to earth
Mhm.
guys. Like, I remember the first time that we like hung out, back in college, and I was just thinking to myself, like, you know, he's way better than he knows, and that's something that a lot of musicians are the opposite. To be honest, a lot of musicians you meet them and you're like, they're acting like they're the next Michael Jackson,
Right.
but they're really
I
just
think.
Michael No One.
Damn. Quote that.
Yeah,
It's crazy, man. I mean, I owe all of it to the people that I know. I didn't raise myself, and I've always been surrounded by people who keep me in check and who emphasize humility and are just good people. Like I'm very fortunate to have been around people like that for a while at this point in terms of my music career. And I've definitely had my fair share of people on the other side, but I find that people who are too cocky are just, sometimes they're scared and they're projecting and they're insecure and, um, understanding like being humble, but also being able to say, I'm good at this and I know I'm good at this and I could do a good job at this. That was really hard for me to learn how to say. To be I don't even know if it's confidence, but it's just maybe just self security of like, you know, I I deserve this. I deserve XYZ. but also being like, other people made me who I am, and they gave me the opportunities and the space to grow into a person who really flourishes.
Yeah, I think in music, you have an interesting kind of combination that's common to see within personal traits where you'll have someone who they're almost, and I'm going to, use the extreme example, but you have someone who's, you know, insecure enough to like want to share their insecurities, right? Because a lot of music, like if you listen to songwriting, a lot of the, songwriting is about pain, and it's about,
Mm-hmm.
kind of feeling down or depression or mental health. So it's people that have definitely like some kind of insecurity at the root of kind of their person, but at the same time, they're confident enough to make the music. And so
Right.
you a lot of the times you have these dualities within kind of the person where, people aren't simple, but kind of like what makes the music happen and what makes, each artist is kind of these combinations between almost polar opposite traits.
Mm-hmm. That's why it's one in a million.
Yeah.
Someone who's got it, and oftentimes they're not even aware that they have it. I would say most of the time they're probably not aware of it, because as soon as you become aware of it, it's a runaway train in the
Yeah.
too confident world. And so the key is always surrounding yourself with people who you view as more skilled than you in a particular area of expertise. If you're the best person in the room, you're never going to grow, and you're never going to be provided the humility that you need in order to build successful and healthy relationships in your career. People are attracted to people who are humble and people who are kind. And so, how do you get there? You know, you got to get your ass kicked for a while,
Yeah.
and you know,
Yeah, I think it's definitely something since I've been injured that I've been focusing on is like giving myself a community, or at least kind of pursuing actively people who care about their communities, people who care about uh helping others, people who are humble, but also people who are talented. Um, and it's difficult because I've just seen too many times you have people that are trying to either take advantage of someone, or they're so cocky that you can't get a word in. Uh,
mm,
there's nothing worse than kind of looking up to someone and thinking that, oh, like this is a musician that I really respect and that I really, I aspire to be like them. And then you finally get to talk with them, or you finally like get a little bit of insight into who they really are, and you find out that they're just an asshole, right? But I feel like
yeah,
the best thing is just finding people who aren't that, finding people that
right,
are willing to help you and that are willing to either take you under their wing or teach you things, make you a better
mm,
musician, guide you. And that's kind
yeah,
of, yeah, it's almost this apprentice like relationship that you don't really formally develop, but with everyone who you can kind of connect with, they can teach you something, you
right,
know?
yeah. To hoard information and resources, to me, is just the worst thing you can do, because
Definitely.
there's no better way to kill your community than that. And I think oftentimes it's because people are afraid that if other people had the same resources, they would skyrocket past them,
Yeah.
which in the grand scheme of things is nothing to be insecure about, because odds are that person is doing something completely different than you. But even if they are, who are you to deprive certain audiences of that person's talents and
Yeah.
contributions because of your insecurities, because you're too scared to maybe give them the email of someone that might book them, that'll put them on a stage in front of people who will hear their songs and their lives will be changed.
Yeah.
You don't get to play God like that. If you,
But people
it's
do.
why people do, and people
Yeah,
gatekeep, and it's a big part of like the playlisting world now and
definitely.
the gigging world, and I just found it people are just incredibly difficult to deal with a lot of the time, and it's people are so jaded that it is sometimes really hard to find people who want to help you, and that you don't have to sell an arm and a leg to prove to them that you're willing, that you're worth being helped, you know.
Yeah.
It's so difficult, and it's why you have to hold the good people close in this world, and you have to take care of them, and just be willing to take a bullet for these people in your community, because that's what it's all about. Like we talked about earlier, it's all about the relationships, and if we don't have those, then we have nothing. And
Yeah.
so it's just you're only hurting yourself by
Yeah, I remember when I
withholding.
was in high school, I I wanted to make, I'm sure you know Flume, the musician.
Mm-hmm.
Like, probably, biggest idol of our generation when it comes to like electronic producing. So I was like always really inspired by him, and there's this prism that he had, this infinity mirror prism that he had on tour with him when I was in high school. And I was like, damn, I really want to make one of those. That's sick. And so I like started like doing a lot of research and, figuring out all the different aspects of the electronics and the physical parts of it. And I ended up going to this art show at the time, and just turned out that I walked by this booth of a guy who made prisms, like made these infinity mirror, not music reactive, but light prisms. And I asked him, "Oh, do you mind like telling me a little bit about how you make these things? Do you mind just like giving me a little bit of that information?" Because a lot of the times you go to these art shows and people are happy to kind of tell you how they do their thing. And I was kind of shocked and super disappointed that he basically said, "Oh no, this is a secret. Like, I have my own special way, and like I can't give away that information." Like, it was just like so disappointing, but also just goes
Yeah.
back to that point where just some people, they don't see that it's really like it's hindering them, right?
Right.
Because if that guy had told me how he did it, if he had given me that information, if he had helped me, I would know his name now. I would be able
Right.
to tell you who he was, because he would have shaped like a 2 year long project for me, and he would
Mm-hmm.
have helped me finish it. And so now, whatever it is, 7 years later or something like that, 6 years later, I don't know who that guy is, but I remember the, exchange, because it just shaped that kind of the crushing of my soul when I was just thinking like people are like this. Cause I don't know. I guess I was naive. I thought that people would just be willing, I was what, a freshman and sophomore in high school. I thought people would be willing to share things. And
Right.
it's just like, I don't know. It sucks. But,
Mm-hmm.
at at the same time, like it's almost his loss.
Yeah. Because you would have told me his name, and maybe I could have told someone his name, and then he
Yeah.
has something fruitful come together. And it's funny you mentioned that. I actually remember seeing that thing in your dorm room.
Oh yeah.
I remember you showing me
Yeah, I
that. It's
brought it to
pretty
college. That's
sweet.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome. And but it's sad that he didn't feel the need or the urgency and how precious it is to share information with people, man. And oftentimes, I mean, it's crazy that you asked him, because I feel like a lot of times people are afraid to ask
Yeah.
because there's an assumption there that they're not going to share, and it's
That's true.
it's it's you know it's it's a huge um, advantage to be able to ask for help.
Yeah.
For lack of a better way to say it, you are asking for help, and worst they can say is no. And unfortunately, that was the case here.
Yeah.
But it helped you understand how incredibly important it is to not be like that.
Yeah. That's true. No, I would never say no. But I think that I was a little bit, I was just naive. And I mean, like you said, like a lot of people, they automatically assume that the person's going to say no. And I don't know,
Right.
for whatever reason, I never really made that assumption. Um, but definitely, like, since I've been injured, obviously I need help with a lot more things. Like, can't use my hands. Like, I got to ask people for help to basically do a lot of different things. Um, but I don't know. There's definitely something that feels kind of, I don't know. There's definitely a shitty feeling in asking for help, but there's also this freeing feeling in asking for help when someone actually like helps you. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, it's like how, on Christmas Day it feels better to give presents than to receive
Oh,
them.
exactly. It's the
Like
same thing.
people, yeah, people love helping people out. It makes them feel good, it makes you feel good. And so to be afraid to ask sometimes it's so crazy silly, you
Yeah,
know.
definitely true. I feel like in relationships in general, it's sometimes the things that I don't know, you're not thinking about and that you just do for other people. And that
Right.
kind of like is what makes the relationship kind of be so good. And then it's so disappointing when you're in that relationship and you see that the other person's unable to do that. I feel like
Hmm.
I don't know, that's when you start to feel almost not used, but yeah, I guess used is a good way to put it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%. It's tough, and it's why I admire teachers so much. They've devoted their
definitely.
entire life to that, And it's like I would love to pass on my musical knowledge to a young guitar player, but I'm just so bad at teaching that I don't think that's the avenue for me in terms of sharing my information. But there's
Definitely.
definitely avenues that I you know can go down and can afford to put a lot of time into. And the sync licensing thing is a perfect example. It's like I'll have a buddy of mine who's making his first record, and he's like, "Hey, like, how did you get your song on that commercial or in that show or whatever?" I'm like, "Oh, just shoot this guy an email. Like, they're always looking for more music. There you go.
Yeah.
It's that easy. Like, it's
Eric, the
not
boy.
Eric exactly,
Yeah.
my sweet son."
Yeah.
But it's so it's simple, dude, and it's you're only strengthening those around you, and the more you help other people, the more they're gonna want to help you. So you
What
can
was
only
that like when you got the call or to be notified like that you got your first like big like sync deal? Was it Shameless? I feel like that was the first one.
yeah, that was the first one. The Shameless ones I thought it was a joke. Like, and I was at a wedding, completely barbecued at this wedding, and my manager at the time texted me, and he's like, "We got the sync," and I didn't really realize the gravity of that until I woke up in the morning. But it was crazy. I was like, why they have a huge library of songs. Why this one? And I don't know. Maybe they
Cuz it's
saw something in
fucking
it.
good.
Well, thank you,
Yeah.
man. They obviously thought so. So I'm very grateful for that. And it's so funny. This song, Jericho, is the song that has been synced to like a couple things, and it recently landed that T-Mobile ad sync, and I'm like, what is it with this freaking rinky dink song that I made when I was 19 that like keeps getting synced? And I'm always chasing like the next big musical thing, and it's like they keep going to that one back there. So there's a lot to be learned from their decision to take that.
Tell me about like this whole Zoom fiasco.
Oh, dude. Well, we were playing at the NAMM convention in California, um, on this one stage, and after the show, a gentleman came up to me and was like, "Hey, I'm from Zoom. Would you maybe want to come demo some of our products? We have like some guitar and vocal products. Which just maybe make a video or whatever." I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And it was while I was living in New York City. So they were based in Long Island. So I met up with them a couple times in a couple different places to demo these products, and it was cool. And I kind of thought that was the end of that. And then one day I get an email, and the dude is like, "We're we as a company are going to the Music China convention in Shanghai. Do you want to go and like demo the products?" And I was like, "That's insane that you would even ask that." And so obviously I said yes, and I flew out there alone. I just got on a plane at JFK and was like, "All right, I'm going to China." It was like a 13-hour flight, maybe it might have been 16 hours. I don't know. It was ridiculously
That's
long.
crazy.
Yeah, I got like multiple meals on the flight. I went to bed and woke up. It
They
was
fly
nuts,
you out?
but yes, they covered everything. It was
Wow.
insane. And so I land there and I'm like, I get through the airport, which was enormous. Finally get through, the section of the airport where everybody's waiting with like signs that say people's names.
Yeah.
So I get to that section and there's a dude standing there with my name on a sign. And I was like, "Oh, I'm Aaron Rizzo," and he didn't speak any English. And so he grabbed my guitar, he grabbed my suitcase and my guitar, and he was like, "Wave to come with him," and he takes me into this parking garage, and I get in this like ridiculously nice Beamer, or it was a Benz or something. It was some kind of like luxury car. And I was like, "What is going on right now?" And he drives me to this hotel where the guy, his name is I think it was Massimo Kawaguchi. He was a Japan rep, and he met me there. Uh, oh, I'm sorry, I just mixed up two dudes' names. I'm shot, man. His name was Osamu Kawaguchi, and so he met me at the hotel, and he speaks English. So he was kind of my boots on the ground, and
There you go.
he was so awesome, so awesome. He's like, "Go up to your room, take a shower, come back down." I meet him at the bar. He's like buying me really nice drinks and whatever. And so, like, I was only there for 3 days, and I had a really amazing team there. The guys at Zoom are fantastic people. I had to have a translator, which was a crazy experience. I never had that happen to me before, and it was crazy. Like after the demos, this one dude came up to me with his baby, and he's like, "Will you please take a picture with my child?" Like,
What?
held
That's
this child.
crazy.
It was so strange, man. But it's such a beautiful city, and those guys were so gracious to show me around and show me a good time, and we went out. And it was just a huge culture shock thing to me, man.
I feel like
Um,
that's a cultural like mecca in Southeast
oh
Asia.
yeah, 100%, and it was like so cool just talking to my translator for the whole trip, and we were just kind of shooting the breeze the whole time, exchanging stories and being like, what's it like here, what's it like there. And it was crazy, man. It just made me, it was a huge perspective moment for me that I was like, this is an entire world of entirely different culture that is not aligned with anything I do. And it was so cool to just kind of be at the bottom of the totem pole there, like a fly on the wall, and just observe and be shown around. And the food was like unlike anything I've ever had
So
before. It
good.
was, yeah, it was, I couldn't even describe, the only way I can describe a lot of it was like when you smell a new perfume
Hmm.
and like that feeling you get. It's like thinking of a color that doesn't exist yet. It feels impossible, but that's what it felt like eating this food. I was like, man, I can't, this is crazy. So that all happened, and I came back, and I've worked with them kind of sporadically since then. But um, Osamu Kawaguchi, my boots on the ground, uh, he was him and I were in the bar one night, and we were just kind of shooting the breeze, and that was what I said in that survey. He was like, maybe thinking about like doing a whole thing through Southeast Asia, and like hitting all these different countries, like Thailand, Indonesia, like all this stuff. And if that had come to fruition, that just would have been the craziest thing ever. Like basically going on tour through these countries and being
Yeah.
able to play and all that. But I went to China in October of 2020, and obviously COVID hit in early 2020, so it all just kind of got shut down, and there were no more talks of that after that. So
Damn.
that's
Yeah.
kind of the gist. But it was still, I mean, I can't even let that rag on that experience. It was one of the craziest experiences of my entire life, being able to go there and to like just experience that for a little bit.
So after it kind of like fell through, obviously it sucks, but do you think that there's a possibility for like kind of revamping that or like doing something through that in the future? Like, do you still have any
Uh,
contacts there? What's the situation for you?
yeah, I mean, I'm still in contact with some of the guys at Zoom. It the China thing felt very one in a million. So I'm not expecting anything else to happen. I'm just grateful for the things that did happen. Um, but it could happen if they decide to do that, and they have a lot of gear, people that demo gear, so they might do it, but not ask me to go, and that's fine. They're just choosing the best man for the job, and so yeah, I don't really have any expectations there because that's a pretty hefty. But if it did happen, that'd be amazing. I would say yes in a heartbeat
Yeah,
for sure.
definitely. It always stinks to kind of like have something and then you're so close. And it's like, like
Yeah.
COVID. Like,
That was more often than not the response, dude. It
yeah.
was it was so tough, and I kind of just viewed COVID as a time to just reset and be like, you know what? Like my gigging schedule was really picking up before then, and I was playing a lot, and like things were kind of starting to happen, and it all shut down. And you might be able to look at that as like, oh, like that's the reason, and that things didn't happen. But I'm like, man, I got to step back, reset my perspective, and that's one of those things where I was like, had that all not happened, I don't think I would be in the position I am today. And I love the position I'm in today. I feel very grown, and I feel uh, just very lucky to be in the environment I'm in. So
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you've definitely been blessed in like a lot of ways. I mean, you're blessed with some talent, some
thank
God-given
you.
talent. Um, you're one of those people that like you can play and you can compose, but you can also improvise. I feel like that's not everyone has that. Um, I was thinking about it. Obviously, I can't play anymore, unfortunately, because my hands. But I was thinking about how, and I don't know if you experience this too, but I'm not religious at all. Like I don't believe in like a higher power or anything like that. But when you're kind of like sitting and kind of improvising or kind of going, just playing something that you've never played before, that you're just kind of letting things come to you. I always felt like it was a very surreal kind of experience. Like almost
Yeah.
like there's like a higher power, like kind of controlling you know, your
Yeah.
playing.
It's it sometimes feels like that, man, and it's crazy. I mean, like it's hard in that moment not to step back and be like, "What the fuck is going on?" Right? Like you're just ripping, and you're like, "Oh my
Like where's
god!"
this
You look
idea
down.
coming from?
Right,
Yeah.
right, and it's a certain portion of it is like I have this vocabulary of stuff that I've learned over the years. I know these licks and these riffs and where these notes are on the fretboard and all this stuff, but it's like having a conversation like this. I mean, that's all it is. It's you're just not using verbal language, and the more you listen in life and in music, the better your improvisation gets because you're just imitating and mixing up and reframing information that you've received throughout your years. So but there's definitely moments where you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like what this feels like right now. And
Yeah, like
there's
where did
moments
this
where
come from?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and there's also moments where you're in the middle of it and you're like, "Wow, this sucks. I wish this would stop right now," you know. But you keep going, and because there's ups and downs through the whole thing, and maybe
definitely.
you get to a point, whatever. But
It's definitely
yeah,
true that it's like you're rephrasing, and you're like talking to someone, and you're rephrasing information that you have.
right,
And it's funny because sometimes you'll be, or I would be at least, like improving on either a beat or like with a couple other musicians, and all of a sudden I'm thinking to myself like, oh, like I'm playing something that I've heard that before, like,
yeah,
oh my god, like what I'm playing, it just turned into like a song that I know. And so that's
yeah,
definitely, to your point, it's definitely like there definitely is this part of it which is very much, it's like pulling on things that you have heard, but maybe
yeah,
mashing them up, or
right.
mixing them up.
And that's
Yeah,
kind of just what life is all about, man. I mean, like you said, I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm not a super religious dude. I don't spend a lot of my time thinking about that. But if I were to put, you know, attach God to a situation, it feels like God is there in those moments, in between the notes, and because you're like, how you can get really meta about it and zoom out and be like, we're a species on a planet doing this. This isn't necessary for survival. In a certain way, it is for enjoyable survival. But like, um, I do. It sometimes I feel like God exists in those moments, man. You're like, I don't, and you don't. God is just a word to put to it
for
for the
sure.
sake of this conversation. But there's definitely some kind of power and mojo going on between you and the musicians, and like there's something that's like it's like chemistry. You know what I mean? Like the more you play with certain musicians, the easier it is to find those moments together. And um, but also sometimes it's you find those moments with people you don't know, and it's just magic, man. I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, it
Kind of
really
an
is.
all-encompassing word. It's just magic.
Yeah, and it happens like it can happen so quickly too. Like sometimes
Mm,
you're just like vibing out, and something just comes to you. You know,
right,
and that's
and it
I feel like,
disappears in a second.
and that's something really fun about playing with like a band or with other musicians is like one person can be going on a solo, and then you'll just like all of a sudden have this idea that you were inspired by the person that you're playing with. I feel like that's a really cool part about music, especially when you're collaborating with others,
Mm,
is that their ideas and their way of thinking can kind of shape your music at that moment. And
yeah,
then, obviously, if you end up playing with that person for a long time, that can start becoming a part of you as a musician, right? You can start to, you know, inherit some of those, facets in your own, you know, play
right.
style.
Right. It's like I was talking about earlier, man, that with that word sonder, you're merging main character timelines with another person. And what's crazy about music is that there's space for two main characters and or 10 main characters and that everybody's kind of telling the story in their own unique way, but it all amalgamates into this kind of this one thing. And
Yeah.
it's bigger than just seeing, FEAT period the person's name on the end of a song title. It's way bigger than that, and it's we're lucky to be able to do it. We really are.
When you look back at like your musical journey, are there influences that you've had, either, a mainstream artist or a friend, that you can really attribute not a majority of your style, but like part of your style too, that you feel like you want to give credit to and acknowledge?
Um, in terms of my playing style, I owe a lot of that to the old blues guys. Albert King and um, of course these my mind just goes completely blank in this moment. But in a lot of those guys and a lot of rock players, like those are the guys that really inspire my playing. In terms of my spiritual and musical interaction style, I owe that to my bandmates. Tristan Jarvis and Nigel Croston specifically. Those are my two guys that I've been playing with for a really long time, and um, I've just learned how to dance with those guys, and it they've always inspired me. Whether they know it or not, they might be hearing about it for the first time if they listen to this. But um, you know, and we were all learning together, right? That's why it's
Definitely.
so inspiring. We were kind of learning how to dance together, and um, yeah, that side of style comes from my collaborators that I know, and are close with.
Definitely. I think that there's definitely a dance, like you said, that you make with like musicians that you play with a lot, or artists that you listen to a lot, that kind of goes on in your brain, that kind of over time really does shape who you are as a
Right.
musician. And even like not a musician, like it just shapes who you are, like being
Hmm.
surrounded by certain ideas, or you know yeah, certain content, just kind of,
Yeah.
it's a dangerous thing, because
Yeah.
if it's bad content,
Yeah. You're
you know
very impressionable.
it can.
It's easy to go in a bad direction with a lot of that stuff. And um, I've definitely had my moments of being with people, and I hope I've never been a bad influence on someone, but I've definitely had some bad influences in the same room as
I've
me. And
definitely been a bad influence on people.
I feel like you've been a bad influence on me. From
Oh,
like
come on.
smoking cigs before
That's going a little bit
class.
too far. That's going a little bit too far. How could I
uh,
possibly be a bad influence on someone? It's obviously just for fun. No, I'm just kidding.
um, but yeah, those are just your energy vampires. They just kind of suck the life out of you, and they push you down a path that you don't really want to go down. So, but for the most part, it's been good.
Hell
You do
yeah.
a pretty good job of vetting the people that come into your life, so as to protect yourself from that kind of thing.
Definitely. What does your future look like when it comes to music? Like, what are you looking forward to doing besides obviously, playing Georgia and, uh, you know, finishing the album? Do you have any other kind of like goals for the future of your music?
Would love to tour again. I would love to make touring a big part of my life. That is a big goal of mine. And I want to find a niche audience, man. I want to find the people, more people. Because I owe a lot of credit to the people who already are this way, but I want to find my people who just really listen and care about what I'm saying. I'm not gunning for this huge thing anymore. That's not what it's about for me. And I just want to spread my message to people who care and who maybe need to hear it. Um, so that's what my future looks like, man. I want to tour and I want to play for those people. I'm through the whole producing thing. I realized I'm a player. I just want to play
Yeah.
and I want to write.
What turned
So
you off to producing?
it was this stark realization of I have a finite amount of creative energy in my life, not only in this day, but like a day that I had a session, but in my life, and I was spending so much of it on other people, people who took it for granted, and people who
Definitely.
didn't realize what was happening. And I'm not sitting here saying that like I'm this amazing person that people should be lucky to be around. That's not what I'm saying. But you spend enough time giving your energy to other people who don't reciprocate, and you get turned off from whatever that thing is. And I love the thought of producing. I love helping someone along their creative journey. But it was getting to a point where someone would come in with maybe half a song written lyrics, and I would write the instrumental, and I would construct the entire song. And I'm like, by the end of it, I'm like, dude, this is my song. I'm like, what am I doing here? It was never. I, I was seeking collaboration, and
Yeah.
that's not what I was getting.
Yeah.
And
I
it was
think a
really
lot of,
sad. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, I think a lot of people, like, they look at production as like, similar to like a mix and master. Like, they look at it as just like a dollar sign. Like, they don't look at it as a collaboration. They look at it as like, I'm going to pay
Right.
you and you're going to produce it. And that's the exchange, right? They don't really care about
Right.
anything else. So
Yeah. That
That's
was
definitely
killing
not.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that exchange, man, I couldn't do it anymore. I was like, this is so transactional.
Yeah.
It was so monetary, not in the sense of money, but in the sense of, how people act towards money. And it was just toxic. And I was like, I just kind of want to make my own stuff and lend my playing to those who want it to a certain extent and leave it at that. I needed to simplify. It was getting out of hand with like just the minutia of it. And we went through some things at the studio of like, dealing with people who didn't want to pay and like, getting into weird sticky situations with royalties and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And I was like, dude, this I don't want to be a part of this anymore. Like and I'm not completely out of it as someone who writes and records records, but I'm trying to keep more of it in my control. And I don't.
Definitely.
Yeah, it was just energy in the wrong places, man. And I'm grateful to be 25 and realize that now, as opposed to being 50 and realizing it a long time from now.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, especially if you know, like, if you can find when you're younger, you can find your, not to say your calling, but kind of where you fit in like a certain career, in a
Right.
certain area of creativity. I think it's only going to benefit you. And it's not to say that you should cut yourself off to trying new things, but if you find that something is more in your wheelhouse, I think it's a good thing to kind of embrace those
Right.
areas. Uh, I think it just benefits young people, helps
Yeah.
them grow
Used
faster.
100%, man. Use deductive reasoning. Figure out what you don't like, and keep all of your other options open. And you know, every failure that you experience going down paths that were never going to be fruitful for you is a learning experience. And you have to be able to view it that way, or else you're going to think that you've just wasted a lot of your life. But
Yeah,
every experience, um, you know, comes together to create the person you are now.
yeah. Well, I feel like if that isn't a great place to end it, I feel like I don't know what is. I mean, I feel like people have a lot to learn from people like you. I think it's great that we're able to have conversations like this. You know, whether it reaches like one person or a million, just gives people perspective, and especially young musicians. I think, um,
Right.
even I'm not saying that you're old. We're obviously not old, but
I
we
feel
have
old.
maybe one or two experiences that can help other people, and I love having these kind of conversations with people. Hopefully, this can be the first of many. Um, if anyone's listened to this, I hope they can, go to Aaron's socials, give him a follow, and he's a great guy, and he deserves way more success than he'll probably ever achieve because he's the most humble, talented dude, just kind of maneuvering life like it's the surf, you know?
Holy
So
shit, man. Thank you
I
for the
love it.
kind words. I
Oh,
mean,
I love it, dude.
dude, I really, really appreciate you providing a platform to have long form discussion like this because,
Yeah.
this is it, if you zoom out, it's like this is what we were talking about. It's
Yeah.
not a short snippet of something. It's long and it's thought out. And it's open and it's honest, man. So I think what you're doing is amazing, and it's great to hear from you. And like everyone listening should also know that you kind of exist in the same boat, man. We're all
Yeah.
just fighting the good fight together. That's what it's all about.
It's true. Yeah.
Hell
Yeah. I
yeah,
appreciate having you as a friend, and thanks for coming on, dude. It's great to hear from you.
dude. It's
Hopefully
an
have you
honor
on
to be on
again,
it.
love to hear from you after the next album's out, and hope everything goes well with
Yes.
that. It's great to see the progression of the sound. I can only imagine where it's going to go next. I mean, yeah,
It's gonna be ridiculous.
some psychedelic, just super ambient, like
Oh yeah,
love
hell
it.
yeah. Whatever comes our way, man. We'll see. We'll just ride in the surf, like you said.